17th. It's another wonderful and beautiful Friday morning here in South Central Oklahoma in Ada, America. So we're ready to talk to you guys today about protein powder. Should be fun. We're not going to go after anybody in particular in this. I know, protein. I've got on my green, by the way, today. Got on my flowery shirt. You never know what I'm going to wear or Cindy's going to wear, so it's always interesting. But anyway, happy St. Patrick's Day. So we're going to talk about protein powders today. We're going to get into some detail about what you should and shouldn't do, should and should not do in a protein powder, and kind of what you should look for in protein powders. This will go to sort of a broader discussion on what you should eat, right? And I would love to say trust me, and I would love to say trust but verify, right? And so I've tried to reference everything that I do, but there's so much just crap out there about what we should eat, when we should eat, and all of that. So I hope to both help myself and my wife navigate through all this, but also as we navigate through it, help you guys navigate through it, and hopefully, have us all what results in better products and sort of better products for our health. And right now, boy, some of the stuff that's out there is not designed to help you, it looks like. It's sort of, there's a lot of wolf in sheep's clothing with protein powders, and so we'll talk about that and kind of what that looks like. Again, not going to call out any brands, not going to call out any particular thing. Lots of brands. There are some good protein powders out there, but again, I'm going to give you what to look for. Okay, so let's dive right in. So obviously we're going to talk about protein powders today. All right. So there is so much junk out there about protein powder. So let me just read this to you. All of the nutritionists we spoke to stress that protein powders should be taken as a supplement to 3 balanced protein-rich meals over the course of a day. That's wrong, okay? Just wrong right off the bat. As nutritionalist Heidi, somebody didn't teach you right, Heidi Skolnick pointed out, no powder is giving you something you won't get from nuts, eggs, or fish. That is true. So that is a true statement. And again, it if we just sort of look at protein, again, amino acids are what we're after in protein, and you can isolate those, and I can give you those directly. And again, that's going to kind of be better and more complete than a nut. I don't want to argue with God's nature. I mean, you can find everything that you need in nature. That's part of God's design. If you're taking a protein supplements after a workout, a good rule of thumb is to get your post-workout shake within 30 minutes of completion of your session, according to ACAM Fitness Nutrition Specialist. So again, this is just wrong. But with so many to choose from, each with its own list of potentially unfamiliar ingredients, those new to protein powders might find it hard to know which one is right for them. There are a lot out there. Yeah, no joke. And there's a lot of crap out there about them, like you're writing, whoever this is. This is from New York Magazine, Best Protein Powders. My clients often come to me confused about which to buy. Be a think? Oh, we talked to these people and 10 other people like them, and athletes and trainers who use protein powder regularly, about their favorites, many of which I've also tested. So they go through and they look at 11 of these, which I'm not going to call out any names, but it just right off the jump, we're so wrong. Okay. So again, let's just talk about some rules with protein powders, and we'll talk about kind of when you should take them here in a little bit. We'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so health rule number 1. So protein and sugar should not mix, all right? Protein and sugar should not mix, and I'll talk to you more about that in a second. Protein and corn syrup, fructose, or high fructose corn syrup should not mix. And I'll, again, go into more detail in a second. But what you'll find is if you look at most protein powders, you're going to find that they have a lot of sugar. Some of them have up to a quarter of sugar. Some of them have more sugar than ice cream, okay? A lot of freaking sugar. And if they don't have sugar, sometimes they'll have sugar and corn syrup or fructose or high fructose corn syrup. These are all sugars. They might have galactic acid. Again, milk sugar is what that is. If they have milk in them, if they're whey protein, again, creates a type of sugar, okay? So sugar and protein, although whey is, protein, but stuff in milk sugar kind of should not be mixed with that protein in you. Again, you're not a cow, right? When those proteins mix with sugar, they create a bad situation. So let's just sort of look at some of these things that I pulled here. Does protein powder cause sugar spike? People ask, a protein shake might be more a helpful option as protein digests more slowly than a carbohydrate. Protein digests more slowly than a carbohydrate. Protein digests more slowly than a carbohydrate. So that's kind of all you need to know if you sort of progress that logic out. But the chance of a blood sugar spike is lower. The person will feel full for longer. However, packaged protein drinks and foods often have a high sugar content, which can send glucose levels soaring. Yeah, protein powders, energy drinks, pre-workout stuff, right? Okay, so yeah. Anyway, look at the sugar and look at the sugar in what you're taking. And again, we'll talk about when you should take them in a second. I'll tell you a story. I've got some good stuff on that. You don't want to take these things. You do not want to take these things more than once a day. You don't want to take these things before you work out and then before a meal. You don't want to take these things 3 times a day. When you take these things, they break your fast, okay? So if you're intermittent fasting, and you should be, all of us should be intermittent fasting, then these will break your fast, okay? If you take let's say you get up in the morning, you take your protein powder before you go work out. Well, you just ate a meal. So you're on a 5-hour ticker with no cancer defense, no immune system, and all that. Ticky, ticky, ticky. Then you eat breakfast. Ticky, ticky, ticky. Then you decide to take a protein powder before lunch. Boom. Then you eat lunch. Boom. Then you take a protein powder before dinner. Boom. And then you eat dinner. Boom. And then you eat snack right before bed. You never have any immune system. You probably, you might build bulk, but you're going to be sick. Really sick. Okay. So mixing proteins with sugars. This is from an article, The Scary Side Effects of Mixing Protein and Sugar. We'll talk about the science behind this in a second. The researchers discovered that adding a sugar-sweetened drink to the meal decreases the breakdown of fat after consumption by 8%. Okay, that's just one consequence. There's way more. Our findings suggest that having a sugar-sweetened drink with a meal impacts both sides of the energy balance equation. On the intake side, the additional energy from the drink did not make people feel more sated. So just having sugar in it doesn't make you feel fuller. On the expenditure side, the additional calories were not expended and fat oxidation was reduced. I'll tell you what was increased. Oxidative stress was increased just by what they're saying here. Okay, the results provide further insight in the potential role of sugar-sweetened drinks, the largest single source of sugar in the American diet, in weight gain and obesity. Do you drink Coke? Stop. Do you drink pop? Stop. Do you drink energy drinks? Stop. Are you drinking protein powders with sugar in them? Stop. Although this study didn't cover protein powders, we can't help but wonder whether a high sugar powder would cancel out the protein's benefits. And it does. And it does. Here's the science behind, what happens and what it does. And you guys can look this up. Please do. Again, trust but verify. Always. The Maillard reaction. So not about a duck, about a guy who discovered this. Fructose, as in the case for other reducing sugars, undergoes the Maillard reaction with proteins and amino acids. The first stage, and again, So fructose and all sugars undergo the Maillard reaction with proteins and amino acids, fats and amino acids, okay? So the first stage of this reaction results in one or more substituted amino sugars. The amino acids get altered. These products in turn enter the advanced and final stages of the Maillard reaction, which involve the formation of reactive intermediates, cross-linking of proteins, and the formation of brown and fluorescent polymeric materials. When you put sugar and protein together, amino acids and fats, they react. They react in the jar. They certainly react inside of you. It would appear that the initial stages of the reaction occur more rapidly with fructose than with glucose. So again, it's going to happen more with fructose, and fructose is in frickin' everything. The Maillard reaction with any sugar, includes fructose, results in a decrease in protein quality. So that high quality protein that you're taking with that sugar, you're wrecking it, due to a loss of amino acid residues and decreased protein digestibility. Okay? Don't put sugar and protein, amino acids together. Sugar should not be in a protein powder. It wrecks its ability, just wrecks any good that it has, okay? Maillard products can inhibit the uptake and metabolism of free amino acids and other nutrients such as zinc, and some advanced Maillard products have mutagenic or anti-carcinogenic properties. Putting sugar and protein and aminos together can cause carcinogenic stuff. It will affect your ability to uptake zinc, which affects everything. Are you getting it? In vivo, in your body, inside of you, the Maillard reactions between proteins and fructose, glucose, and other reducing sugars may play a role in aging and in some of the clinical complications of diabetes. How come you've never heard about the Maillard reaction? How come old Chip is the first one to tell you about the Maillard reaction? Yeah, I'd never heard of it either. So there you go. Here's a study, protein fructosylation, fructose, and the Maillard reaction. You can look this one up. The PubMed is right down there, and learn what I learned. All right, so what else about this? So protein cross-linking, a possible cause of loss of solubility in milk protein concentrate powder. So again, if you have milk protein concentrate powder in your protein powder and it's in there with sugar, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to Maillard out. It's going to quack out or whatever. And may occur via advanced Maillard reaction products, so methylglyoxal or whatever that is, and whatever that other word is, cross-linked proteins in the insoluble fraction of reconstituted MPC80 contain all major caseins with AS1 casein predominating. Those are, not necessarily bad things, but again, you don't want the amino acid content of something that you think that you have altered, and you certainly don't want it to become this last bit about mutagenic. That's not good. So this happens in a lot of different things. It's a known thing that happens in food. You don't put sugar with protein, with aminos. All right, so let's talk about something else that happens. Again, this isn't sadly the only thing that happens with sugar. So let's talk about the clock a little bit. And again, this is another reason why, fructose, sugar, this stuff is just so bad for us. So again, and this has to do with when we take our protein powder. So real quick, what I'm showing here is our circadian clock. I'm asking you the questions. When do you take your protein powder? Does it matter? It certainly does matter. Does it affect other things? It certainly does affect other things. Take it before a workout, take it after a workout. So let's talk this through. Okay, so first of all, you got to know about your clock. Do I have the... Yeah, I do. Okay, so you got to know about your clock. So what happens with clock is that, again, we all run by the sun. We run by our interaction with the sun. We get energy from the sun. We set our cues from the sun. We're in a tight and intimate, you get frequency from the sun. You don't even realize. we're in this tight, intimate relationship with the sun. But what that looks like as to your, let's say, metabolism, and then, when and what you should eat. Well, our bodies do this dance every day. So at certain times, we're doing certain things. And this is controlled by genetic expression, which we'll talk about on this next slide. 50% of our genes do this, okay? But I want to talk about that in relation to something else. So let's walk this through on this slide. But what happens is basically at certain times genes are expressed because you're doing stuff and it's that time. So organs sort of move in energy expression around in a circadian rhythm. And it's like sort of as you're moving stuff around and doing stuff, organs have to turn on. And then when they turn off, other organs turn on. But your body can only do so much work at once. You're not doing everything all at once. That's not energetically, conservative. That's just not, how you work, right? God's a perfect engineer. He built you a really cool vehicle. It's really cool how it works. And by understanding how it works, we can, help ourselves a lot more. But how it works is you want to focus on sort of one thing at a time, okay? And it runs by circadian rhythm, and you do it exactly the same every day. If you're a shift worker, you'll be a little bit off in mind. But, we basically sort of go through this. We're building hormones. We're building immune mediators. We're repairing cells. I don't know exactly what it is. I do know, but I don't have that slide. But, again, you go through these functions at different times. Best way to illustrate this, if I give you melatonin at noon, I measure it circulating in your blood. It's in your blood. It's absolutely, you've absorbed it. It's around, does nothing to you because your genes aren't expressed, okay? If I give you melatonin at 8 o'clock at night, measure it in your blood. It's in your blood. It's moving around and everything. Your genes are expressed. You go night-night, right? Because it affects you. So there's many things about us that sort of run in these expressions that run with our circadian rhythm, that run with the sun. The most disruptive and chaotic thing that you can do to yourself every day, the most damaging thing, is eat. When you eat, you literally do so at the cost of your immune system, okay? Now, obviously we need to eat. There are certain nutrients that we need, so we got to kind of do it, but we got to understand the cost. We need to be intentional about what we're doing. And again, taking protein powder before you go work out is not intentional. You think you're doing it to help your body. You think you're doing it to help your muscles. You think you're doing it in order to sort of give yourself some juice for that workout. That's not what's happening. You're putting your body in a weakened state. So when we eat, we need to be very intentional. I'm not saying don't take protein powder. I'm saying take it before you eat a meal to augment the meal, to make sure that you're getting everything that you need out of the meal. That's when you should take your protein powder, is right before you eat, sort of in conjunction with a meal. Because that's when your body will stop, it has to stop everything that it's doing when you eat, and it's got to focus on what you just ate. But part of that is your amino acids and sort of how you deal with proteins. And again, we'll talk about that in a second, what protein is. But this matters. And again, we shouldn't be, the quick story, had a young lady who was having some physical problems come in, had a conversation with her. She's very fit, worked out all the time. For the most part, she was intermittent fasting, or thought that she was. Intermittent fasting window was in the afternoon, right? So she would kind of eat in the afternoon. But in the morning when she got up, she'd take her protein powder, her workout powder, that had a lot of sugar in it. In fact, it was 1/4 sugar. Just that was completely wrecking her metabolism and causing her all kinds of physical sort of side effects that she didn't even put two and two together. All we did was cut out for her, in this particular situation, cut out that morning protein powder. Told her to, first of all, get a better protein powder without sugar, but then take that right before she ate, rather than in the morning, and cut out any kind of morning thing. She said, well, I won't have energy to work out. Yes, you will. Again, I go every day, I go 22 hours without eating, okay? Every single day. And I have just as much energy, at sort of hour 22 as I do right now at, it's been, well over 12 hours since I've eaten. So You don't have a lot of energy. And again, that's not where you get energy. You sort of get some energy from nutrients in the food, but it's not about that. So she figured that out. She learned that. Again, it may take a little bit of a behavior change because we're used to eating at certain times and our tummies sort of are used to digesting at certain times. But you don't need that protein powder before you go work out. That's the big thing. You need to make sure that you're getting enough protein to account for whatever bacteria you've got going on and whatever your workout is sort of taking from you. And, protein powders without sugar are a good way to do that, but do it before a meal. Okay, so around half, that's 50% of our protein encoding genes are circadian. So it's about, I think, 43% of all of our genes are circadian, meaning that, if you do that genetic test and you say, oh, my, whatever gene is off, right? Well, if it's one of these circadian genes and you measured yourself at the wrong time, yeah, it's not going to be expressed. It's not going to be on or off unless it's hijacked or, being messed with. So there are lots in this clock process, and again, this is a physical process inside of us. How does it work? By your eyes. Your eyes receive light. That light is sort of communicated by vitamin A, which is really, really cool. And it's communicated by vitamin A to almost every cell in your body. Within a cell, depending on what time it is, because again, you're sort of doing this big dance throughout the day of cellular function and sort of working on certain things. But cells will transcribe stuff depending on what time it is. And then they'll stop that depending on what time it is, all right? So when cells are trying to get active or these big pathways are trying to get active, then that happens through they call it transcription. So genes are transcribed and expressed as sort of this happens, right? Well, one of the basically this is Nobel Prize 2017 stuff, so you can go kind of look it all up, but how clock and BMAL and all this work. But PER2, clock is several different genes, so BMAL, PER2, and all this. But PER2 is sort of I think of it as the vibrational sort of gene. It's the thing that, sets the rhythms out, and it has to have a high amplitude, right? So it has to have a strong signal, PER2, all right? And if it's not strong, we lose control of, 50, 43%, whatever the number is, of our genetics, okay? So we want that signal to be super strong, and we want all this machinery to be working correctly. Well, guess what? Yeah. Sugar wrecks PER2, and it wrecks your signal strength. So it wrecks the power in the signal, and it basically knocks down your ability to control a lot of these genes. And it's a strategy, honestly, by, it makes you, let's just say, I won't put it that way, I won't go all conspiratorial, but let's just say that it makes you a very weak and opportune host for bacterial invasion, okay? If I can knock down PER2, and I can do it with sugar, then you're going to get sick from something over time. Following this study, it was shown that, the sugar, it's basically a sugar transferase, competes with casein kinase to post-translationally modify the circadian clock protein PER2 at a critical site in the protein serine 662 to serine 674. I can measure that on my PCR. That's kind of cool, isn't it? These studies, seriously, these studies reveal that glycosylation can participate in post-translational modification networks that conclude in altered stability of core circadian clock proteins in animals. Basically, these things can modify clock, okay? This is kind of what it's saying. Clock and fructose. So if you take sugar, you're going to have a weakened expression of clock. That's kind of what I'm getting at. So without all the science, hopefully just you could go look it up and all that. Trust and verify. I've given you the verification. The trust part is sugar knocks down your ability to control 42% of your genetic expression. Don't eat sugar. Fructose hits it from another way. So clock and fructose. We aim to explore whether fructose, in the absence or presence of fatty acids, modulates circadian metabolism. It did. Fructose led to reduced activity of the AMPK and mTOR signaling pathway. AMPK is where you go from fed, which is your immune system is down, you're an opportunistic host for pathogens, it's where you go when you eat a meal and for 5 hours after you've eaten, to fasting. So that cellular switch, that thing that determines that, is AMPK. Again, if you have reduced activity, you just don't want to stay there, okay? mTOR signaling is how you do a lot of your cell growth and defense, right? So mTOR is sort of what kicks off an inflammation, and it's what sort of gets your macrophages all fired up. So again, you don't want that knocked down because you can't defend yourself. So it almost looks like sugar and fructose are honestly put in our diet to make us more opportunistic for pathogens. I mean, that's just kind of the bottom line. And then things are removed from our diet to even make it worse. That's sort of the big matrix conspiracy theory there, but it's looking to be true to me. However, fructose fatty acid, I don't know what fructose FA is. We have to get in the study and lead, but I'm sure that is a fructose derivative. And they pre-treated the cells, so that led to inhibition of the AMPK signaling pathway, but activation of the mTOR pathway, that creates oxidative stress, boys and girls. That's a hallmark of cancer. Yeah, so that's just pretty much a hallmark of cancer. Not saying that fructose will, I kind of am, sideways, but that's a hallmark of cancer. Fructose also increased the expression of inflammatory markers, whereas the addition of fatty acids dampened their circadian expression. So again, if you throw fructose in there with some fat, it's going to cut down your ability to run clock. At the clock level, fructose, or whatever this thing is that they built, altered the expression of core clock. 50% of your genes now cannot be controlled. More specifically, fructose led to altered expressions of, and that's the whole clock genetic sort of stuff, BMAL, ROR, REV, ERB, and BMAL1. So with reduced phosphorylated BMAL1 levels. So we don't want to wreck our phosphorylation. That's bad. That's how bacteria get us too. So it's, again, this sort of sugar, fructose, and bacteria thing, they all go together and they affect our health and all this. But anyway, that's a big rabbit hole. So in conclusion, our results show that hepatocytes, liver cells, where you deal with all this stuff, treated with fructose respond differently if fatty acids are present, leading to a differential effect on metabolism and circadian rhythms. You don't want that. This is achieved by modulating BMAL activity and expression. No, golly. God is a perfect engineer. He didn't say, throw a bunch of sugar and gum in your works and see how it works. He doesn't want you to do that, boys and girls. So, what do we need? In a protein powder, here's what we look for. It must contain the 9 essential amino acids. Again, you can look those up. It's good exercise to do at home. Look them up. Make sure your protein powder has them. Ideally, it is heavy on the branch chains. If you're working out, you're depleting your body of branch chain amino acids, so you have to kick those up. I mean, you need so normal amount of branch chains just to run, but if you're muscle building and all that, you need way more branch chains, okay? That's what we need to rebuild our muscles. So those are leucine, isoleucine, and valine. Your protein powder might also contain a source of fatty acids, and these should be balanced or anti-inflammatory. And again, I'll talk about that in a second. It should not contain any sugar, milk sugar, or other sweeteners except stevia. Stevia is okay. Stevia is a plant. Stevia actually helps your insulin. It does good things that sugar doesn't do. It does not contain fructose corn syrup or high fructose corn syrup. If you're sick or you have a medical condition, you need more amino acids than most people. So if you have an autoimmune disease, if you have, any kind of RA or, anything, you're going to need more aminos than most people. So let's talk about just real quick about these. So let's drill into the fats a little bit about what do we need fat-wise. And this is from my friend Dr. Artemis Simopoulos. You can look her up, but she is I've had the privilege of talking to her 3 or 4 times probably on the phone. I just cold called her one time, or I actually sent her an email, and she got on the phone with me. This lady is the world expert on omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids, on their balance, on kind of what that means in the Mediterranean diet, on how important it is, to browning your fat, on browning fat, on just omega-3, omega-6 balance, okay? And so this is what Artemis says, and this is very important that we should all listen to Dr. Simopoulos. Again, she is the world expert here. So on dietary fats, and again, this is, first of all, you need to know that saturated fat and omega-6 fat are inflammatory, and monounsaturated fat and omega-3 fat are anti-inflammatory, okay? And the reason I'm pointing that out is if you begin to look at the fats that you eat and the fats in our diet, we eat a lot of saturated and we eat a lot of corn, which is high fructose corn syrup and all the stuff we've been talking about, but it's also an omega-6 fat that is inflammatory. We don't hardly eat any, and it's almost like they've been pulled from our diet. Monounsaturated fats, and there are a lot in nuts. So if you eat a lot of nuts, then you're eating them, but cashews and almonds and things like that are heavier on monounsaturated fat than saturated. But we have a lot of saturated fat in our diet. Saturated fat is meat, mainly, but it's also, avocados. We need some saturated fat. You run your body on saturated fat, so you need some of it. But again, we don't need it in the ratio that we get it. So right now we eat all these inflammatory fats and none of the anti-inflammatory fats. 80% of us die of an inflammatory disease. And it's, I would agree with Dr. Simopoulos and say it's literally this simple. We just need to sort of change the ratios of these fats. We need to consider some other things. But our PUFAs, which are the omega-3 and omega-6, that balance, omega-3 to omega-6, should be 1:1 to 1:4. And there's all kinds of studies. You can go read about these. And again, a lot of them are Dr. Simopoulos' studies. But that's the range that we should be in. That is the healthy range. That's the range that our bodies need these fats in this balance to be able to brown our fat, to create proper adipose tissue. Your fat tissue is an organ. It's as important as your liver or your lungs, okay? And we need to understand kind of what we do, what we put in our mouths, and how that sort of constitutes out to how we make up this organ, because it's controlled by what we eat. Now, according to the total amount of fats that we eat, this is Dr. Simopoulos' suggestion that monounsaturated fat make up about 75% of our fats. Saturated fat, we need to cut way down to about 8%. And again, for most of us, this saturated fat is probably 70% of our fats right now. So we need to flip that equation. PUFA should be about 17%. And then of that 17%, you need to keep a 1:1 to 1:4 between omega-3 and omega-6. This is super important for your health. I mean, we have to do this. Our bodies don't run right with too much omega-6, and we get that all over the place. So you've heard me preach about this for years, and I'm going to keep preaching on it. But number one thing, and again, I'm going back to this. So what do we need in a protein powder? But you need fats, and that may or may not be in your protein powder. But if it's in your protein powder, make sure that you're hitting all these marks. Okay, so make sure it's sort of adhering to these graphs. And make sure that the omega-3, omega-6 is 1:1 to 1:4. If it's got any kind of corn in it, any kind of corn syrup, any kind of high fructose corn syrup, you already know that's bad from all the other stuff, but that's going to skew that, into the omega-6s. So what do we need as to second thing? First thing we need is fat. Second thing we need is protein. So what is protein? Okay. Well, a lot of people will have the plant versus animal, argument on protein. When you boil it down, all protein is just proteins are a string of amino acids, okay? It doesn't really matter where they come from, a plant or an animal. They're just a string of amino acids, okay? And so it's important, the most important thing to know about protein is not like animal and all that stuff, that's chaos and confusion. The most important thing to understand about protein is the amino acid profile, the amino acid content, okay? So if you're eating chicken, that's a different amino acid profile than beef. That's a different amino acid profile than fish. They're all protein, again, according to dietitian, whatever the hell. They're going, oh yeah, you need to eat so much protein, eat this and that. Well, again, with animal sources of protein, you have here's what they should be. So here's what a cow should be. Well, what if that farmer didn't feed that cow cysteine? You won't have any in that meat. What if that fish farmer didn't feed those fish cysteine? What if that chicken farmer didn't feed those chickens cysteine? And I'm just picking on cysteine. It could be any one of them. Then that meat will not have cysteine in it, and you won't get any cysteine. Now, again, this is important. This is almost more important than the fats because we need these all the time. Why do we need these? Cells are little factories. They want to basically take in amino acids and build proteins with them. That's what cells do. That's as important as building RNA, okay? RNA is just doing that with nucleotides. Cellular work is doing that with amino acids and building proteins. So let's say you have rosacea. Rosacea is tied to the lack of expression of a certain protein. Why? Why would your body, God's a perfect engineer. He's not just going to say, hey, cells, stop making that stuff so this person gets rosacea. It doesn't work that way. Every cell inside of you is always trying to make that protein to help you with rosacea. They just need raw materials. They just need the raw materials. Okay? So again, if you're relying on that farmer to make sure that that cow got all the essential amino acids it needs, you've got a weak link in your supply chain, boys and girls. So I'm not, saying favor plant proteins over animal. I'm just saying if I go to a plant protein, well, I pretty consistently know what's in that. The only thing that stands between me and that is the sun and God, right? I've got a farmer or somebody in between that animal in me and that protein. So that's all I'm saying is just be aware and conscious of where stuff comes from. And the important thing about protein isn't the source, it's the amino acid profile. And we've got to make sure that we're getting the right amount of amino acids. And again, if you work out a lot, you're going to need more branch chains. If you have RA, if you have an autoimmune, if you're aging, you need more amino acids, more, okay? The worse our bacterial hijack is, I guess is the best. We all have the bacterial hijack. That's why we age. We should live a lot longer than we do. I'll get that figured out. It'll be fun. Already well along the way. But we all have this bacterial hijack. So for some of us, that may be symptomatically look like this very severe disease. For some of us, it may not have any symptoms. We just may be able to fight it better. It's all about our immune system and keeping our immune system built up. But anyway, a critical and core component is our cells got to be able to make the stuff that they need to defend us. And those come from amino acids, okay? And this is why we take a protein powder, to get the amino acids. But geez, don't, poison yourself with the stuff that you take. Be aware, right? Okay, so we built one. All right, so mine has all these principles in it. So you can sort of go out and look and see what's in mine. But I up the branch chains in mine. I up the things that are going on kind of with this bacterial hijack to help you with it. So then we put fats in ours, but no sugar, absolutely no sugar. God. Remember I'm a Star Trek fan, and so I remember, when they beam down to the planet, right? So Bones would always go down, and he'd go down, and he'd look at their, guys were cutting each other open with, dull, rusty blades or whatever, and barbarians, right? So, again, that's kind of the level that we're at. Well, with some of this protein powder, we're literally poisoning ourselves with it. So, anyway, I'll leave you guys with that. I hope you've enjoyed this. And again, the principles here just apply to everything, right? Don't eat sugar. Don't eat corn syrup. If you do, understand the consequences of what you're doing, and that you're gonna, at least temporarily, you're gonna damage yourself some. Be aware of what you are eating. Well, first of all, intermittent fast. Again, that puts your body in an elevated state. And then be aware of what you're eating within that. As we eat less, it becomes more important what we eat. So we have to be more intentional about what we eat. So fats, amino acids, vitamins, trace minerals. You need some fiber. And again, it's best to kind of get that from, vegetables or fruits. We all get plenty of glucose, so I wouldn't even worry about that. So anyway, hope you guys have enjoyed it. We'll see you next week for another exciting Chip Talks. I am going to be doing some scientific stuff too on Chip Talks, so it may not be on Friday when I drop some videos, but I will be dropping some I need to lay down some science and kind of build a history and a track record. And I'll be doing it, and I disclose everything publicly now, so you guys will get it as I'm kind of learning it. But got some really, really important stuff to get out there and have you guys sort of review and talk about. So anyway, see you guys. Talk to you later.